Today we're going to talk about the unconscious mind. John Cottrell here from breakthroughleadership.co.uk. So I think there's various professions actually didn't even acknowledge the existence of the unconscious mind, and yet if we think about the processing power of our conscious brain as opposed to our unconscious brain, I think our unconscious is supposed to be like 1,000,000 times more capable than our conscious brain. And the way our conscious brain deals with its relative puniness is by filtering out information, distorting information, deleting information. So it's a very poor computer compared to the supercomputer that is our unconscious. And if you think about it, the unconscious does some obvious things. You know, if you fell asleep and you didn't have an unconscious brain, you'd obviously pass away, wouldn't you? Because your blood wouldn't be pumping, you wouldn't be breathing, you wouldn't be maintaining body temperature and all of that. All that happens for you automatically. You know, if you go running, you'll find that your body will automatically, you'll start breathing harder, your heart will be beating more as it pumps blood around the body. All this happens for you. You don't have to tell it what speed to beat at to help you to run faster. So that sort of bit we all know. The less well-known stuff is around emotion, for example. So the unconscious is where it's the domain, if you like, of emotion. So it's where we store memories. It organises them, typically in almost like a chronological order, but clusters of similar memories, which we call gestalts. So you can have strings of gestalts going back in your own, your own history, if you like. And the other thing it does with that capability to store and organise emotions is that it tends to repress the stuff that it thinks will harm you. So traumatic memories or otherwise negative emotions tend to be repressed, and then they're only brought to the surface for resolution when your unconscious thinks it's going to be safe for that to happen. And so one of the things when I'm working with clients is actually getting them into that psychologically safe space, and therefore persuading them that it's actually okay to bring this emotion out and to be able to release it today. Yeah, and that's a fairly important part of the process. The other thing, so it will present stuff for resolution if you tell it it's okay, and it also makes connections between similar things, and those similarities tend to be because the emotion is the same. Right, so we've talked about the unconscious running the body, you know, the temperature, the breathing, the bodily functions, all of that stuff happens to us, or happens for us automatically, and obviously it knows when to stop as well. The unconscious learns really, really quickly. I don't know the exact mechanisms of some of this stuff, but this is just from the body of knowledge that I've been trained in. We've talked about emotions. The other thing that we don't not consciously aware of is that the unconscious is the domain of our habits. So if we know that the unconscious learns quickly and it's the domain of our habits, what keeps us in bad habits is those unresolved emotions and limiting beliefs that lie in the unconscious. If we can change those, we're going to be much more able to change the habits we want to change. Too often approaches tend to be coping approaches. They don't actually go into the unconscious, deal with the root cause, get rid of it, release it, and then allow you to install better, more productive habits for yourself that make you happier than the present unproductive habits you may have. Your unconscious is also what's called a highly moral being, and obviously it will only be moral to the values that you were taught or you learned and that you accepted, and then it's like a moral compass. This is where you get your feeling of right and wrong, is from the unconscious mind. Your unconscious enjoys serving, but it needs orders to follow. And one of the challenges with our unconscious, therefore, is that very often the orders we're giving unconsciously, and when we don't mean to. So another reason why you need to get rid of those repressed old negative emotions, limiting beliefs, because your unconscious will hold you to those beliefs whether you like it or not. So if you think you're no good and you don't deserve to earn money, and that's what would it be called? Not a conscious belief, but a sincerely held belief, your unconscious will hold you to that sincere belief until you change it, of course, in which case you can teach your unconscious something different. One of the other things that's interesting, and this is back to the habits again, you probably heard at some point how many times you need to repeat something until it becomes a habit. I know there's been experiments done with astronauts where they wear sort of upside down glasses, and after 30 days the body's learnt to take that image and turn it the right way up. But if they don't do that experiment for long enough, like 29 days or something, then the image remains upside down. So this idea that you need to repeat a habit is true. That's what the unconscious needs. It needs repetition to help it learn and to help it install the habit. It's also said that the unconscious maintains and controls all perceptions, both regular perceptions that you and I would talk about, and it's also said telepathic. I haven't had, in my knowledge, conscious experience of that, but that's the learning. And you'll have heard people with the NLP training saying the basis of perception is projection. So this is basically saying, in layman's terms, almost we see the world we want to, and that when we want to see something different, we will. And even in science, I think it was Einstein that talked about the fact that you couldn't trust an experiment because the result would often be influenced by what the scientists wanted, rather than it being completely objective. Now, I don't quite understand all of that stuff, but I'm just telling you what I've been taught and what I've seen and what I've heard. And so how it works then is that those preconceived ideas, let's call it that lie in your unconscious, then come to your conscious brain and literally tell you what to do. And you might have seen a video I've done called the 5 Backseat Drivers of Life. These are the things literally controlling you in the background that much of the time you're completely unaware of. So if you want to empower yourself, it's very, very important that you become aware of your own backseat drivers, if you like, of your own preconceived ideas, your own perceptions that are stored in your unconscious that then guide your decision making, your choices, your behaviour in your conscious life. And the last thing I'd like to say about the unconscious mind, and this is something in my practice as a coach use all the time, is the fact that the unconscious doesn't really handle negatives. Now, what do I mean by that? So if you said to somebody, don't walk, the word that would be remembered, the subject, is walk. So what you focus on, and there was an example, I think, of a politician being accused of beating his wife, and so if the politician starts saying, well, of course it's ridiculous to say that I beat my wife, I would never dream of beating my wife, and so on and so on and so on, all we've actually heard is beat my wife. So it's very important that it's the subject of our thoughts, not the polarity of our thoughts. So we could be away from, and you could dislike wife beating, or we could like wife beating, but the subject is still wife beating. All right. So it's very important that we control the subject. So in other words, instead of deciding that I don't want to be poor, it would be much more productive to want to be wealthy. And now I've changed the subject of my thought from poverty to wealth. Yeah, and so the subject has changed. And then your subconscious acts to influence you and help you notice opportunities that bring you what you want. And obviously it's choosing what you want based on subject, not polarity again. So it's very, very important you have to choose the positive towards subject that you want, and you're much more likely to notice opportunities to bring that into reality. You still have to take the action, of course, but your awareness is now tuned much more carefully to what you want. And I notice clients telling me that now things that in the past they would have seen as obstacles, they're now able to detect the opportunity in those situations which they wouldn't have done in the past. Yeah, so some real life examples of where that works for people. So the unconscious, in summary, is a very powerful computer, if you like, but until now you probably haven't been in charge of its programming. And one of the best things you can do is learn how to release the old programming and install the programming you want, and that will help you achieve the life that you want.